And welcome to Nikos RPG. I am Jonathan Albin, the Game Master's Guide, and today we're going to be looking at things a little differently. We just did an episode a few hours ago, probably, that was actually focusing on what players want from the games. But today I want to talk about what the Game Masters get out of it, what it is that they are hoping to achieve in doing the game mastering task. And before we get into that, make sure you go down below and click all the buttons so that the algorithm will know that you're part of our audience, and we will dive right in.
Absorbing damage is the name of the game. From the claws of monsters or the heat from a ball of flame, or strength in numbers is a roll of the dice.
Alrighty. So, although you would think, since it is a games group that is gathering together, you would think that the games masters and the players would be of a unified mind when it comes to playing the games together, but it really isn't true. The person who is endeavoring to create the story has much different drives and motivations than might be otherwise obvious. And so today we're going to be talking about them in particular. We're also going to talk about what game masters expect. And the short answer is that the game masters expect for the games sessions to go horribly wrong at one point or another, and that they will have to put out some fires, change some minds, and adapt the story to move forward simply because the things that they are hoping to achieve don't actually occur. So what I'm asking you as a player of role-playing games, when you are engaged in the session, to consider at least some of these motivations that the game master brings to the table so that you can understand each other a little bit better and make the game sessions more excellent for everybody involved. So game masters want to be able to tell a story, but to tell a story you have to have willing ears. And although almost every game master I'm aware of has a great time doing so and generally has a good experience, there are always the stories of the players who either have come in with a chip on their shoulder, or they've come in with dynamics in their own personal life that have literally closed their ears, or the players have, for some reason, developed an adversary relationship with the game master. And there's a ton of reasons why I wouldn't even speculate on what they might be, but the one thing that a game master needs above all else is somebody who will acknowledge what is being said and acknowledge and identify those parts of the conversation so that the story can move forward. The second thing we want is clever and thoughtful repartee. We don't want to speak the prologue to a scene, describe all the details for it, introduce an NPC into conversation, and be left hanging. Now, sometimes this happens simply because the players are caught unawares. Either the person that the game master was not that was addressing wasn't directly paying attention at that moment, or perhaps there was something else mechanically that was going on. But the idea of thoughtful repartee merely means that when you are addressed in game session, be of a ready mind to be able to respond. There are times when there are too many variables and a game master has overwhelmed you, and that's going to be par for the course on occasion. But generally, be of the mindset that you are aware and part of the conversation, so that when it does turn to you, you have a response that not only fits the requirements of the scene, but makes sense for the story as well. The next thing that the game master really is hoping for among all of his players is a healthy level of curiosity. Now, I have to say that this can be a rather sharp sword, because the concept of healthy and curiosity, when put together, can be a dangerous thing. I've had players in a campaign where I've set up a conflict to occur physically in the last half an hour of the game, but the players spend the majority of the time continuing to ask questions about the information that really isn't pertinent to the story, but it is of prurient interest to them as players. And so while they are being curious, they're not being healthfully so, and therefore they are dredging the game and slowing the process and making the game really non-functional. And this is a practice that will develop over time. You do get better at creating and enhancing this concept of healthy curiosity, but it's also a practiced skill that players can pick up on. And I've even done workshops on how to be a curious listener and other methodologies to help players really get more out of the role play mechanism than they have otherwise. The next thing that we really, as a game master, hope for above many other things is the concept of integrated communication. Now, this is not always possible. There are quite a few times when the players can get into a game of telephone where what one person says to another person has now morphed into something completely other that the players are now interacting with as fact, when the transmission of the data was either lazy or shorted for some reason. Maybe there wasn't enough time, or maybe another phone call came in, but it's caused the process of communication for the whole to break down. And this leads to a positively glacial expanse of the story for the day, because your players are now having to be fed the same information from another source again and again within the time frame of the session, so that there is very little left for the combined activity that was, in theory at least, going to be part of that game session. So integrated communication is a solution that we all grasp for and hope for, but it is one of those few items that can be far off, even if we've done everything we can within our power to make it something to be accomplished. This one is a little problematic if you've got a games group that has a long history and has worked on various tasks together collectively and now have a large number of individual pieces to be done. There is a desire from we of the game master group, the idea of the storytellers, that we hope for a shared enthusiasm about the story. If we've given it compelling information, we've given several clues that lead, at least we feel, lead towards an objective, then we hope for there to be a shared enthusiasm, and this sometimes doesn't happen. It's a catastrophe when the enthusiasm wanes within a portion of the group but not within the whole, so that there are people at loggerheads about the accomplishment of the given tasks within the game. And you notice I'm kind of speaking around the subjects, and that's really because what ends up happening is that it doesn't have to do anything to do with the mechanics of the story or the details of the story, but simply players can have issues with one another and fail to become coherent even when the story really demands it of them. And it's this hope for a shared enthusiasm that really helps drive Game Masters week over week to put forth the story, because we are hoping to be able to get a coherent response from the group to the evidences that we provide. This one is also problematic, and it simply has to do with the mindset that the players bring to the table. There are, in every one of us game masters, the desire for there to be a call and response, a statement of the story and a response and reaction from the players. And this concurrence, coherency from within the player base is really important to the story being able to move forward. If you're going to have a fight scene where people have to depend on each other, they have to at least all agree on what's going on in the scene. And one of the elements that the game masters hope for is that the players will see past the possible conflict and instead see the coherence, the beauty that collective group thought might bring to that particular scene. And this is essential to the continuation of a story. If you end up with players that are not reasonable in their concurrence, they are either the best example I can think of is game players who hear a resolution from one of the players in the group, but that isn't what they want to do, and so they say fine, just throw up their hands and cross their arms and do everything they can to be as controversial as possible. And this change of focus really does harm the gameplay, even if it's tangibly, visibly just an issue between players. And so we as game masters hope every session for there to be at least some form of reasonable concurrence where we can forward the story and move the yardsticks, so to speak, so that the adventure can move into potentially new places in the future. This also leads to the demand for collaborative action, and it's one of those pie in the sky dreams that we game masters have, that somehow when we've given the story to the players and they've got all of the elements that we could possibly think of and it's been provided to them, that they will collate that into a useful targeted objective, and that all the players will leap on board and do their part to create a wondrous and amazing and surprising collaborative action that will fulfill the scene and give everybody a warm, fuzzy glow. The tangible reality of this is that most often the players that have the capability for this collaboration are the ones who have either overthought the situation or overconsidered possibilities or bought into the false narrative of an NPC. There's no way that a game master can have any clue of which of those will trigger, but the idea of hoping for a collaborative action by the players is our greatest dream, and when it happens, it is amazing. Everybody at the table can feel the clicking off of the scene. The conditions are absolutely being met by the players, and it's just a great game session. Of course, we as game masters pride ourselves in our creativity, but we hope for and endeavor to gather from our players at least the same level of innovation and creativity. I have rather dark memories of a time when playing with a games group, 5th edition, and the conditional conclusion was always the same. The bard is going to attempt seduction on the lead character, cause distortion. This will distract them. The rogue will then begin conflict, and it just turns into the same old week over week. And while it can be particularly clever, it can be particularly useful, and for those who like to win, it can be a very effective way of overcoming the situation to use the same tool. But it's, as in the old saying, a person who has a hammer sees every problem as a nail. If you don't consider what other possibilities you might have, you may leave real opportunities on the table and not actually get to expand the reality of your persona. The character that you've built and worked so hard for will be sort of flattened by this lack of innovation. And really, we game masters offer the same opportunities week over week, hoping for something different. And I suppose in the terms of what is insanity, that might be an example. But the game master's hope for innovation and a hope for creativity is really what drives most of us back to the table week after week, just simply see what might be developed in this next session. Of course, when you're talking about a group of people, there's always the expectation, and in the case of game masters, the avid hope for an air of common decency, that the players will set aside their differences, set aside their personal issues, and play the game as the personas they've developed and get past these crude methodologies that develop. And for the most part, this is a truism. Most game sessions do end up with some level or modicum of common decency within the games group, but there are still those times when one player is particularly incensed about something or comes to the table with an agenda that is that no one else is aware of, and the common decency flies out the window. When this happens, there is a darkness that falls on the table, and they can create a tangible silence. And it's really important for the game master to figure out how to identify and recognize and clarify these moments so that the players can come back to the table renewed and willing to play through. Because the point is, we're all trying to have fun. We're all trying to accomplish what elements that are in existence in the story, while at the same time exploring our own character backgrounds. And the last one, which is sometimes unsung but needs to be stated anyway, game masters are always hoping for at least some gratitude and appreciation for the efforts they put in. Granted, we derive great amounts of enjoyment from doing the job of a game master. We love the interaction. We love the dynamics that put us here. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here week over week. But it does seem almost logical for the players to recognize and acknowledge the amount of effort that a game master puts into it. Now, this, of course, does depend on the game master, as we've said before, not phoning it in and actually being present at the table, but this appreciation for what they do really does expand and provide them with the energy to make it back for the next session. So, although it's perhaps a distant hope, a group that develops an appreciation for and a gratitude for their game master provides themselves with a games master who will be back week after week forever. So, what does this all boil down to? It boils down to community and belonging. The game master wants a games group that's going to work together coherently to fulfill the objectives that he sets before them, and the players are looking for a game master who's going to provide fair interpretation of and narrative explanation for what is going on in the scene every time. And between the two, you end up with a very cohesive unit, a very coherent group of people who are enjoying life and enjoying being together. Speaking of that, I want to thank you for being here today. My gratitude for your appreciation of my shows, and I hope that you will join us, as the song goes, each week, my friends, because I do this 5 or 6 times a week, and I hope to see you in the next episode. I'm Jonathan Albin. This is Nikos RPG. Now go play.